Hi everyone, thought I'd just come on and do some crocheting and maybe have a chat. I've got my coffee, but I made you a cup of tea and I've put a couple of biscuits on there. Is that okay? I didn't put in too much milk. I hope you enjoy it. I thought that I would do a bit more of the story that I made up when I went for a little walk. I'm afraid today it's a little bit too far for me to go, so I thought I'd sit here and have a chat with you, drink my coffee, do a bit of crochet and tell you about some of the people that I imagine would have lived in the house with the young lady we spoke of. I think the young lady, I think we're going to call her Dolly. Her parents obviously would have called her Dorothy, but everybody else just called her Dolly. And as I said to you, she was a scullery maid in a house in London, we'll say. It's Victorian type era. So what's that, 1890s? I'm not very good at history, so don't expect it all to be precise. It's not a very big house, and she works with a few people, considering some of the houses that had huge amounts of servants and the likes in them. I mean, some of them had like 19 servants, that's indoors, just to look after a couple of people. But in this house it wasn't quite so large, because they weren't overly rich, but they were comfortably okay. Now, as I said to you, Dolly had lived in the country, so it was a really huge move to London. And can you imagine what it must have been like for her? The hustle and the bustle, and seeing some of the fancy coaches and things like that they had then, considering to the dray or the wagon she would have ridden on if she hadn't have walked to the market, whatever. But anyway, she worked with a few people, and as I said, she was the scullery maid. She was very young when she started there, but sadly she was stuck in that position because there was a young girl above her, Jane, who was the kitchen maid. So unless Jane left, got married or was sacked, Dolly would be stuck where she was for a while. She didn't want to leave. She didn't want to try and go anywhere else, just in case she couldn't get another job, because as I said, her family did depend on the money that the young lady earned. So one of the first people she worked with, as I say, was Jane. She was a small, petite, pretty little creature, shall we say. Dolly didn't know much about her background, but it was obvious that her parents weren't wealthy, but it seemed that maybe they had had a few problems and had come down a step or two, and poor Jane had had to step into the breach and get a job. Maybe we can talk about that another day. Then also one of the main people that Dolly worked with was the cook, Mrs. Doe. Mrs. Doe, D-O-E, was a surly woman, quite strict, but she could be nice. Her kitchen was her domain. What she said went in it, and nobody, not even her husband, Mr. Doe, who just happened to be the butler, got a look in at making any of the rules and regulations in the kitchen. He, of course, was the boss of the others, but she was the boss of her kitchen and anybody else that came into it. They had been married for quite a number of years. Mrs. Doe was a rounded creature who wore her pinny and a little hat occasionally, but always had her hair up in a bun. She had like a little cloth cap that she wore that was elasticated and made her bun look like a plum pudding on the top of her head. Can't say Dolly liked her, but Dolly didn't dislike her, and there were reasons for that. Mrs. Doe had had a daughter who now was moved away and married with a child of her own. And Dolly had quite a look about Mrs. Doe's daughter, so Mrs. Doe had kind of taken her under her wing. And when Dolly wanted to go anywhere or do anything on her free day, as I said, sometimes the cook would save her a few bits and pieces to eat along the way. They all had a pretty good kind of arrangement going there. It was all hard work for everyone. Even the cook had to work hard. It wasn't just the other staff. The cook had to work hard too. And she knew that without her scullery maid Dolly, she too would have to be up at silly o'clock in the morning to light the fires and do the things. And she relied on Dolly a lot. So she knew she had to be fairly kind to Dolly. Not overwork her, because if she overworked her, the child might get ill and then she wouldn't be able to do the things that the cook wanted her to do. Now, as I said, Mrs. Doe was married to Mr. Doe, and Mr. Doe was the butler. Now, we all know that the butler really kind of ruled the house. He was one step down from the master and the mistress. He was the one in command. Mr. Doe was a man of good principle. He definitely wouldn't have lied, and so it made any criminal act in his mind, lying, stealing from the larder, anything like that, a massive no-no, and it meant if you're caught doing that, you're out the back door, because obviously he was servants, so he wasn't going through the front door. As I say, they had one daughter who lived away and was married, so they didn't get to see her very often because they only got half a day off, and that's the way it went. That was church and what you did in the afternoon. Mrs. Doe in the afternoon used to enjoy doing some embroidery or some light reading. Nothing too deep, nothing too, what should we say, strict. Something, I don't know, what did they used to have then? The Penny Chronicles or something like that, where she could read a little romance story that was always written in the nicest of ways. There was 2 footmen. When I say footmen, they did more or less anything and everything that was asked of them in the house. Yes, they would answer the door to people. Yes, they would walk out in the morning with the man of the house, but it was mainly for show more than anything, and they got to do all sorts of other things, even down to cleaning the silver, or helping to clean the silver when it needed, and helping to spring clean different rooms and even decorate. The 2 footmen were Arthur and occasionally his friend that would come in called John. Nice young lads, 19, 20. Only been there a couple of years because there had been 2 lads before, 2 footmen, but they had gone on to higher and better paid jobs. They didn't want to stay a footman forever. They were hoping, of course, to move up to become under butler, whatever. But there wasn't an under butler in this house, so the chance of that happening was very few and far between. So then you had the upstairs maid. Now she was more the one that did the jobs upstairs for the lady of the house, making sure that her boudoir was perfectly dressed and made perfect for the lady of the house when she retired. Even though she proclaimed to keep the fire going, if it wasn't for the scullery maid, she wouldn't keep the fires going. Because the scullery maid did most of the work, laying the fires in the morning and getting them all going before anybody else even got up in the morning, as you know. Then there were, out in the garden on the grounds, it wasn't overly large, but it was just big enough, like a small park. Nothing fantastic, lots of trees, a few borders, and they even had a glass house or an orangery where they would grow some fancy fruits and even a melon. You know, that was a big thing then, to get a melon on the table. Everybody realised you had made it then. Yeah, there were the 2 in the garden. One was an old man in his late 60s. He had been there for what seemed like forever. He had been there with the people before, so the garden was designed his way and it kept him busy, and when his son was old enough, his son came and helped out. So there was 2 Mr. Rays, young Mr. Ray and Mr. Ray, and that's